What's up, YouTubers? Today we have a Ford Exploder. It is a 2015 with 3.5, and customer stated that it was running hot and leaking coolant, but not always at the same time. So basically what that means is a water pump. So it was leaking from just above the AC compressor. As you can see, it all down there, still leaking. Sometimes it would leak and run hot, sometimes it wouldn't leak and still run hot. So the customer took it to another shop and they said it was the radiator. So waited for the radiator to come in and replace the radiator, and it didn't change the overheating or the leaking. So they put the old radiator back in, I believe. I put a pressure tester on the coolant reservoir right here and put about 20 psi on it, because it's rated for 16. And it started leaking down there above the AC compressor. You can kind of see down there's the alternator, and right below that is the AC compressor. And these 3.5s have a timing chain driven water pump, as opposed to the earlier trucks that had the 3.5s. The water pumps on those were belt driven. So yes, to change the water pump, we need to tear the whole front of the motor off, and then while we're at it, we'll replace the big timing chain. So what we're going to do first is disconnect the battery, pull the engine cover off and the air box, and drain the coolant and the oil. All right, so I used one of these Christmas tree tools to take the clips off of the engine cover, and then the oil fill cap, took that loose, and a couple hose clamps and a couple vacuum hoses for the breather and breather box assembly. So now we're going to get all of the plumbing and electrical off on the top of the engine as much as we can while the oil and coolant is still draining. On the bottom of the radiator there's a little red plug, and you just twist that loose and water or coolant will come out of the radiator. When the coolant and oil is done draining, then I will jack up the right front tire and take the wheel off so we can access the inner fender, and we'll take the inner fender off using this also so we can get to the crankshaft pulley eventually. All right, now we're going to start taking all of the plumbing, fuel lines, and electrical off from around the intake so we can get the intake manifold off. All right, so to take the intake off, we had to take a few various hoses off, fuel line. With some of these clips, let me see this one right here. This one's a little difficult, a little funky. This one's a little bit different. If they feel like they're gonna break, they will break. So just take your time. If one's flustering you, move on to something else. All right, to take the intake off, we have these bolts right here. And then this one was right in front of my face. And there was also, where is it at? The one that goes right here, which is hooked to that back bracket right there. And also there was another one. I took it out by mistake. I took the lower intake bolt out by mistake, so I'll go ahead and put that back in. Then I think I'm gonna leave the fuel rail since I had my fuel line disconnect tool. And then we'll start taking all of these coil plugs, coil packs off, and all the electrical. All right, so this is a good lesson on why you should cover your intake. As I was taking this clip loose, the red locking tab flew off and almost went into the intake, but it landed right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and cover the intake up. All right, so this is the progress on the electrical so far. I'm guessing this is a cam sensor. I don't know what happened, but it's rigged up and I don't want to unrig it, so I just unbolted it. And I'll put the bolt back in, so that way I'll remember. where it goes. All right, there's a connector back here that goes to this. I've got to figure out. Got all these wires loose. Sometimes the zip ties will break. It's okay, it's not the end of the world. So as soon as I can get that connector back there done, I got all this loose. There's a down there, there's another cam sensor, and it looks rigged up the same exact way. So maybe that's factory rigged up. And then there's a couple connectors there I got to take loose. And here's the main power wire. Got that out of the way. And then right here I got one more wire. So this is going to be time consuming getting these aggravating connectors. Again, these things just pop out and then you push the tab. That's for your injectors, coil plugs, or coil packs, same way. Pop that up, push that, pops up. And here's your ground wires. Put the bolts back. There's one and there's the other. So now we will get working on the aggravating connectors and then get the valve covers off. All right, so don't have to undo all of the wiring. I can push it out of the way to get the valve covers off. So I went ahead and took the coil packs out. Most people would vacuum right now, but I'm not worried about that. So let's get these valve covers off. All right, so I did go ahead and vacuum a little bit and cleaned up some of the leaves off the cowl so they don't fall in everywhere. So now it's time to get these valve covers off. All right, so I had the valve covers loose. It was the spark plug hole grommets hanging me up. Something felt like it was gonna break, and I just wanted to make sure before I went crazy with it. So now I am going to start working on the front of the motor. All right, so I got the inner wheel well out. It's mainly a bunch of Christmas trees. They got Phillips head screws. They don't really need Phillips head screwdriver to take them out. And then right here you got several, actually 5 bolts that have 5.5 millimeter heads, and then on the bottom, going upwards, you have 3 bolts with 8 millimeter heads. Here you can see water leakage. There's the access to the crank pulley. A quick lesson on these Christmas trees. Yeah, you can, they are threaded and you screw them out, but that never works. So I just take my utility knife, pop a little right underneath the corner, it pops it up, and then take your Christmas tree tool, pop this up, and then pop the whole thing out. So now we will start taking the front of the engine off, first starting with coolant overflow reservoir. All right, so getting the serpentine belt off was a struggle for sure. Can't get a breaker bar in. Maybe next time I'll try to go on this side. This bracket's in the way, the AC liner's in the way. I took the bolt loose. Luckily there's a capture nut on the back side, so I won't lose it. So I just put an adjustable wrench on this and pushed it, tried to get some leverage, got the belt off. Just be careful because this will slip, and if you're trying to take the belt off and you got your finger between the belt and the pulley, it's probably gonna hurt. All right, so now we are going to take the floor jack, put it underneath the oil pan with a board, and take this motor mount loose. All right, motor mount came out fairly easy. I wish I had the E sockets to take those studs out, but I have no idea where it is, obviously. So motor mount's out. Now it's time to take the front cover off. And there's a whole bunch of different bolts and different lengths, different sizes. But first I'm going to take the tensioner off. That's super easy, self-explanatory. All right, so now I'm going to turn the engine over by the crank pulley to get the cams to line up, so we can install the cam lock tools, so that way the cams won't move when we take the timing chain off. After that, we're going to start working on the front cover, and we'll take all of the bolts loose and leave them in like a thread or two, and then try to pry the cover loose gently. And if it doesn't come loose, we'll look for more bolts, because these timing chain covers are very easy to break if you miss a bolt. All right, so basically I just took one of those. I had the cams kind of close. I set the tool on there, turned the crank just a little bit here and there, and it dropped right in on both sides. So now we're going to take the front off. Also note, I had to take the 2 oil line feeds off to put the cam tools in place. All right, I think I got all the bolts out. Up top there's 6 of these size. All the rest in the bottom are that size and length. There's a couple random ones. These 2 15 millimeter headed, and then there's one little short one, or small one. I did go ahead and take the crank pulley bolt out. So when I turned the engine over, I was able to use a 19 on the crank pulley bolt, but come to find out it's actually an 18 millimeter socket that you need. So I got that loose and out. So now I'm going to put a puller on the crankshaft pulley and get it out of the way. All right, so a quick update. I had to take this phaser loose to get this bolt out. So stupid. And then to get the timing chain from around there. I got both of them loose so I could wiggle them. And more importantly is when I was removing the harmonic balancer, it cracked. Probably I had one too many ooga doogas on the impact with the puller. So I have to pick up another one of those. So once this tensioner, I take this loose to get this bolt out, to take this tensioner off, so I can get the water pump out, you know. But it is what it is, and we're fixing to pull this water pump out. All right, so we got the mating surfaces moderately cleaned up. And to note, this new water pump actually has a rubber gasket instead of being held on by silicone. So we're gonna go ahead and throw this back on. All right, this really cut my tail. Trying to get the phasers back on, lined up with the dowel pins. There's marks on the timing chain, on the small timing chain, to line everything up, and it just wasn't working. So I had to take the cam lock tool out and put a 7/8 wrench on the cams and turn them just a little bit. And then I went ahead and put the intake phaser on first, and then the exhaust popped right on. So hopefully everything's good. Now it's time to put the main chain on. All right, I got the timing chain in. Right here I was able to wiggle the chain between the two phasers at an angle. Got it in, and of course this side that's already cut my tail, I had to take the exhaust cam phaser loose to get the chain in between. So now, also I put the upper guides on, and the tensioner is in place, but I waited to put the big guides on until I could get the timing chain in place, because it goes around like that. All right, so I got the timing chain on. So how I did it was, and I wish when I tore this down I lined up the timing marks, but I didn't. So down here on the crankshaft, you can see that dot. I put a new gear on it also. Those two marks go on there. But obviously nothing lines up on the top because it's not where it's supposed to be. So what I did was I took the tensioner off and put this guide on with the chain, and then pushed the guide up and bolted the tensioner on. Now everything's tight, so what I'm going to do is rotate the engine over and try to line up all of the timing marks. So I'm going to have to put the crank bolt back in, and with a spacer, and so I can turn the engine over and make sure all of everything lines up, including what I'm worried about is these two phasers right here, because they just gave me such a hard time. All right, so after I turn the motor over 18,000 times, as you can see, that dot is supposed to be where that blue mark is on the chain. Same for here and here. And that dot on the bottom is supposed to be in between those two marked chain links. So obviously it's off. All of them are off the same though. So I'm gonna take the tensioner, I'm gonna pinch the tensioner tight, take the tensioner off, and get the chain lined up on the marks. All right, we have success. All right, and I've turned the engine over a few times. by hand. And I'll, of course, forgot to take the black plates out, and engine wouldn't turn over, and I was like, what the heck? But so I took the tensioner off again and this guide, and I was able to get enough slack to get everything lined up. And I didn't like the way the aftermarket guide looked, or the chain sat in it, so I put the OEM one back on. So now that everything's timed, we can start reassembling everything. All right, don't pay attention to the beer cans. Before you put silicone on the engine block to make this timing cover up, make sure all your bolts are accounted for. All these are good to go, and there's 5 up here that are on the cowl. And also, one more thing before I forget, make sure you pull the pin on the grenade. All right, you got the front cover back on. I applied a liberal amount of Permatex number 2. It's slow drying and it doesn't harden up. So one of the bolts that I thought I had to take out because I couldn't see it was actually the stud for the alternator mount. So now I have to put that back in. I thought I had all of my bolts, but I didn't. There was one left on the table. All right, so the front cover's on. All the bolts are torqued-ish. Now I'm going to attempt to install the harmonic balancer without tearing it up. I got to take the crankshaft nut or crankshaft bolt out and use the install tool to put the harmonic balancer on. All right, so back in the day, I would have just lined the harmonic balancer, crankshaft pulley, whatever up, and tried to get the bolt started and just took the impact and went to town. But I'm actually going to use the proper tool this time. So what you do is you find your adapter that matches the same size, thread pitch, all of that stuff as the crank bolt. Screw that in there, tighten it up. Don't go crazy with it. And get this on. There's no keyway on this, it's just a press fit. Doesn't really stay. Then take this like so, and you gotta back that out. I need 12 hands. All right, so what I did is I wedged that wrench that goes on here up against the frame rail and just continue tightening. I'm wore out from it. So now we'll disassemble all this and jack the motor up and put the tensioner on. And then while the motor is jacked up, we will put the belt on because it's so hard to get to. And then we'll put the motor mount back on. All right, so we got the tensioner on and the belt on. That helped having the engine jacked way up to get to the tensioner. And got the motor mount on, and now we're fixing to put the valve covers on. Gonna reuse the gaskets that were on there. And do not forget your oil feed lines. Go right here before you put your valve covers on. All right, got the valve covers and coil packs back in. One thing to pay attention to, which I completely messed up. So I put paper towels over top of the cams so nothing would fall down in the heads. And while I was turning the engine over several times, over and over and over, I think there's a reluctor wheel. There's some sort of wheel back there, and it caught the paper towel and wrapped it all around, and it took me a few extra minutes to get that loose. So now I'm going to go through and hook all the electrical. This stuff is super easy. If you just lay everything out, all the connectors just fall into place. You can't really mess anything up. All right, I got everything back together, double checked all my wiring, fuel lines, filled up with oil and coolant. Got the battery hooked up, so I guess there's only one thing to do. Let's fire it up. All right, no major leaks. I'm gonna shut it down. I still gotta put the wheel well back on and the tire, and then take it for a ride, make sure we don't have any major issues. All right, real talk about this video. I didn't line the marks up originally like I should have. That cost me some time. The crank pulley really messed me up, slowed me down. If I didn't have to worry about those two things and filming, editing, narration, dialogue, setting the camera up, all that stuff, this could be done in a full weekend by myself for a couple $100. Now, apparently this customer, which I learned later, put a whole bunch of stop leak in this engine trying to stop the leak instead of just getting it fixed, and ended up clogging up the thermostat. So after I test drove it, yeah, it ran hot, and it was the thermostat. The radiator was pretty clogged up also, so don't use stop leak or anything like that. They're band-aid fixes. Just fix the damn thing. $200 for the parts easily in a weekend. You could do this yourself with basic hand tools. It's not that hard. It's just aggravating. It's just a pain in the butt. But I hope you learned something, learned what to do, what not to do. Either way, if you like this video, go ahead and throw me a like, subscribe. Got a bunch of videos like this on all kinds of vehicles that, you know, we try to fix in our yard to save us money, you know. And I tried to save this customer money, and I did, because this is a $4,000 job at the dealership, because they're going to replace everything that doesn't need to be replaced. Anyhow, hope y'all had a good day.